March, 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 left, 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 right, left. Company, halt! Hello there. Time to talk about Roman weapons. I'm your commanding officer, and it is good to see you today. We're going to talk about those Roman weapons that we have not talked about yet. Good to see you all. All right. Place for this helmet here. Hope you learned about those. All right, let's move on. Roman weapons. So, we're going to start with the pilum. It is a Roman javelin. Stood about 6 feet long, a bit taller than Mrs. Colley, and it was about 5 to 10 pounds worth of carrying. The iron tip was soft, so there's a reason for that. When you throw a weapon at someone, the one concern you've got is that people can throw it back at you. You throw a spear, someone can throw it back at you, and it's like giving your enemy a weapon. Well, the Romans thought things through on this and said, no, we're going to prevent that from happening. So the tip of the pilum was tempered iron. So the way it was made was it was heated, then cooled, then heated, then cooled, then heated, then, and so that became very, very tough, very, very strong, very hard. But the rest of it, the shaft, the long bit there, was soft, so that when you threw the weapon, the tip would dig into whatever it hit, shield, armor, soldier, tree, whatever. But then the tip would bend, or not the shaft, the middle part would bend because it was soft. So it was useless, completely useless to throw back. The spear tip was long enough to puncture a shield and the man behind the shield. So not just your shield, but it was long enough it would go through the shield and still hit you. So it was pretty useless, or pretty useful against shields. It was pretty useless to have a shield around when those things came flying at you at once. And then think about, a legion was 5,000 people. Yeah, you'd have about 5,000 of those getting thrown at you. It's pretty scary. Example of a pilum in action. All right. The plumbata. Yes, they look like throwing darts or lawn darts. That's because they are. They're throwing darts. It was an iron head with a weighted end, and it was throwing darts. They could be thrown a decent distance and do rather considerable damage. These were not arrows. These were not, throw them like actual like darts, like if you've ever played darts. No, you grab the end, the back by the feathers, and you loft it into the air. The weight on the end of that tip causes it to tilt forward then as it comes down, and that's the end that's going to come down and hit someone. It's going to come down with a decent amount of force as well because you're throwing them quite high, and it's going to do considerable amount of damage. So an example of some Romans winding up and throwing those fantastic plumbatas. Each soldier would have a couple plumbatas on his belt when walking. So a good distance weapon. Now you have the Hasta. Hasta was spear. It meant spear in Latin. These are some Roman spearhead or hasta tips that are in a museum right now. It was about 6.5 feet long. Iron tip, wooden handle. The men who carried this were called the hastati or spearmen. It was meant for thrusting, not throwing. So this you wouldn't throw. This you would thrust with. Thrust forward, come back. You'd be in the front lines thrusting with your spear. If your spear was long enough that someone with a sword wouldn't be able to reach you, you'd have your spear there. They wouldn't be able to get to you because your spear is, would be about 4 feet in front of you, and no one's going to be able to reach you with a sword from that distance. So 2 examples of some spears. Notice how the spear tip is very different than the pilum. The pilum was very thin with the little itty bitty tip on it for throwing. The spear's tip is very fixed onto the wooden handle. It's a much bigger tip for stabbing into things. You're not throwing this because you will definitely have it thrown back at you, and that would be a bummer. So you are holding onto it and stabbing people with it. Then you have the Spatha, the fantastic sword known as the Spatha. It originally was a cavalry sword used in wars and in gladiatorial fights. It's Latin for the term broad blade. So broad means that the blade is very, very wide. It does have that nice tip. It is double-sided, a double blade on both sides. So you can spear with it and you can slash with it because you can cut on both sides. The Viking swords actually became fashioned after the Roman Spatha swords. They took their ideas from the Spathas. You have the nice handle in the back with the pommel, very flat. This prevents your hand from getting, cut, but a very broad blade compared to, it's very broad. Fantastic Spathas, very, 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 very Roman. But originally, as a cavalry sword, it was easy to swing, and then became a Roman military sword until another sword got in its place. Ooh. Give me a chance to look at some Spathas. All right. So the Spatha was used for the cavalry and some military men, and then the Gladius showed up. It was the original sword for Roman foot soldiers and infantry, but it was also used by the gladiators. A gladius means sword in Latin. A gladiator is one who wields a sword. It's a cut thrust weapon, and it's really sharp. Now, gladiators would have a fancier sword, much like this one, with the very decorative lion paws on the handle and the hilt. But the Gladius, still a very cut thrust. You have your tip, you have your very sharp ends, both sides are cut. A fantastic sword for attacking. The gladiators will have, the fancier ones because, well, they're just fancy. Otherwise, they're a fantastic sword for attacking. Very sharp, effective, very light blade, easy to swing back and forth. A fully equipped Roman soldier would then have a gladius or a spatha, one of the two, a scutum, their shield, one or two javelin, the dagger, and some plumbata as well. So they would have quite a bit that they'd be carrying. And that is all we have for Roman military weapons. Short video today. Well, we'll see you tomorrow.